Welcome back, and to continue our discussion on the subject matter, let's join our correspondent Abdul Salam Jibrin with excerpts from our yesterday's discussion.
What you see in our climb is that in various sectors there are leaders. There are leaders in the civil society sector, there are religious leaders, there are leaders in academic, there are leaders in business. You will see that in our own climb, leadership in all the other sectors have performed better than leadership in the political sector.
So many people are going to leadership without really understanding why are they going to leadership. And that's exactly why we are here. So we have this poor leadership selection process, and even the criteria set for leadership selection have been marred with a lot of irregularities. So the very moment we're able to get it right from the foundation, and I think we should be able to overcome some of these challenges. Apart from that, even the present, some of us, the present crop of leaders, we also have a challenge with insincerity. Many of us are not sincere with what we are doing.
What I think we are missing here in trying to give an accurate leadership is the issue of honesty and integrity. The youth of this country needed to be assisted with capacity building if we need to build a very strong Nigeria. Because you may wish to agree with me that the greatest asset this country has is still its young people.
Long before I came on board to be the governor, I realized that there was need for this societal reorientation. We have to start somewhere. Even the issue of recruiting the best of people to come into politics, to go into positions, there has to be this reorientation to let them know that there is their need for them to come and participate. I agree the political leadership, of course leadership at all levels need to be upright, but the political leadership is the central issue because that is, it's just like the pyramid, it trickles down.
We need good men, but we need more than good men. We need to build firewalls around governance, and you need to bring the people into that conversation. And that is why the question about reorientation is very critical. There are societies that have had very profound program of reorientation of their people. And those societies pass through, major political upheavals, like a revolution. The former Soviet Union, China that we are talking about, and you even go to ideological school right from your youth. But for the leadership to do this, they have to be committed to total change.
All right, now those were excerpts from our first conversation on this topic yesterday by our guests who were with us in the studios as well as who joined us remotely via Zoom and from our Port Harcourt Network Center. Today, we have three guests with us. Two of them, of course, are regular guests on Good Morning Nigeria. First, let's welcome Professor Osareme Osumbo, a former governor of Edo State and also former two-term senator, former chairman, Nigeria Law Reform Commission. Prof, glad to have you again this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Also here with us, Honorable Shaba Ibrahim is a member of the House of Reps. Of course, he's representing the federal constituency of Lokoja and Kotokarfe, and also one-time chairman of the local government, and indeed he was Argon chairman in Kogi State. Honorable Shaba, delighted to have you with us this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
And we also have joining us Johannes Toby Wujola, Curator, Abuja Global Shapers Community. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, let's begin by having your own thoughts on what is the clear linkage between the leadership deficit and the governance challenges that we're having. Symptomized, of course, by the many issues that we're having to deal with day to day at all levels and in different parts of the country. Professor Osumbo, take your first shot.
Well, as from the background introductory, brief. I was particularly struck by the contribution of Senator Shekarau that mentioned that when you're talking of leadership, it depends on the kind of leadership and the setting that you have in mind. Whether it's in the corporate world, whether it is in the civil service, whether it's in the educational sector, leadership exists at those various spheres and levels. But by far the most important is the political leadership, because that has a way of impacting and influencing the leadership at those other levels. You mentioned that there have been challenges. Why do these challenges exist? Why do they seem to be intractable? First of all, many people would want to be identified as leaders or called leaders. But to a very large extent, leadership is not imposed. Leadership is inspired. True leadership that drives development and change is inspirational. It requires a lot of charisma, requires a lot of vision that people identify with the individual. Because unless these attributes exist in a particular person, he may occupy the office, but he won't be able to inspire process of development at that level. So it is important. It's also important, arising from that fact is to say that leadership emerges from within the society. Because it's the people that say, oh, this person, we can see that he can show us, lead us in the right direction. Let us follow him. We see that he has a vision. We see that he has integrity. He is somebody who commands leadership, and we accept him as our leader. So the end result, that is the leadership that you get, to a large extent depends on the followership. So if you are to get the right kind of leadership, it means that the followership has a great role to play in the emergence, in the process and the emergence of the leadership. So the challenges of leadership in Nigeria, in summary, is not just looking at those at the top, which is important, but it's not enough to focus on those at the top. You have to look at the source of that leadership, the pool from which that leadership emerges. Because unless you get that right and the process of emergence, you will always have problems at the top.
Okay, Prof, thank you. Honorable Shawa, leaders, from what I've heard from the excerpts and from what Prof has said, are not necessarily those who hold leadership, but on the contrary, people are potential leaders. What's your take on that?
Well, I think to an extent I agree with Prof, but when you talk about leadership within the concept of the Nigerian state, the political leadership readily comes to mind. And who are the political leaders? Those who have been elected, and in some cases appointed by those who have been elected to lead the people and to guide them aright. So in 9 out of 10 cases when you mention leaders, everyone's mind goes in the direction of the political leadership. I think that part of the problems we have, the challenges we have, is the process of the emergence, just like Prof has said, emergence of leaders. We have a very opaque system, with due respect, that does not prop up those who, in most cases, the people may actually desire to have elected as their leaders. That is why we have a plethora of challenges here and there. Whenever elections are conducted, the tribunals are jumped to the park with litigations. So, some may be right, some may be out of outright, how do I call it? Outright temerity, but if the system is transparent enough for you to know or have reason to know that I have lost this election fair and square, it will be idle for you to prove, to try to even pose a challenge. So in most cases, the challenges we have, just like the speaker before me has said, Professor has said, it's, the process of emergence is very key. And we must look in the direction of electoral reform. We must have a situation where people's votes will count, and those who they actually intended to pick are those who emerge, eventually. And another salient issue is we seem to believe more in rhetorics. There are people whose characters are already shaped over the years that it would take a lot of, it would take magic or divine intervention to have them change. But in the course of campaign and electioneering, they go say, hey, XYZ is a changed person already. Nobody changes at the age of 30.
You think?
Yeah, you don't change. Once you're 30 and over, you're already formed. It's either you continue to excel on the part of the righteous deeds, or you continue on the negative side. So we must be able to pick our leaders from the point of view of the person we are seeing, not who he professes to be, because already we have known each other. A lot of us have been tested at various strata before the particular point that you are imagining. No greenhorn is able to make it to the top without some form of support by the people. So in most cases, we have the followership. To say, I've come to this irresistible conclusion that the followership are also almost as guilty as the leadership. What do I say? You complain about the people in power, you complain about the government in power. When it comes to election, they give you some peanuts and you are there dancing all over those same people. You elect them and you start complaining. I think it is what in law you call a contributory negligence. You are also partly guilty and you must take responsibility. So I think all of us have sinned one way or the other and fallen short of the glory of God. We need to look inwards and ask ourselves, because the saying goes, it's even divine, it's in the scriptures. A people get only the kind of leadership they deserve. At least from the Islamic point of view, I can tell you that. So, and as a true believer, I buy into that, and I think that we need to do a lot more. The people need to know that there has to be some form of sacrifice on their part, not immediate gains, so that they can sow the seed for a better tomorrow. That is my take on this.
Okay, Honorable Shaba, thank you very much there for your contribution. We'll come back to you. Let's bring in now Johannes Toby. Johannes Toby, perhaps one way to also look at this, and I would like you to elaborate further, is to say, look, when you say a leader, contextualize it, for instance, in terms of leadership positions that you find in different spheres of life. You couldn't possibly have a maritime vessel that is so expensive and carrying goods worth several millions of naira, even of dollars. And then the captain, who is the leader of that ship, is incompetent. You couldn't possibly have, the largest aircraft we have now is 787, Boeing 787. The captain is the skipper of that aircraft. It has to be competent. It has to have skills. It has to be trained. Now, we're just talking about an aircraft. We're talking also about a ship. Soccer that Nigerians are generally crazy about. You hear sometimes why some persons are arguing, so look, this person couldn't possibly be the captain of this team because he's not a motivator. Another person will say, no, this is the chairman. We still revere Christian Chukwu today. They call him Chairman Christian Chukwu because he was a successful captain of the Green Eagles, as they were then called. So if for those other aspects, there is an essential focus on what leadership requires, and appropriate leaders are recruited, why then would it be that in the sphere of politics, which is primacy, on our other aspects of life, we tend to neglect recruiting appropriate leaders or even grooming appropriate leaders?
The problem of leadership generally in Nigeria, and I agree with Prof. I also agree with I think Senator Shekarau, is that we don't have a recruitment process. And following through with the examples you cited, one, the ship captain, the captain of the plane, I cannot wake up today and say I want to fly a plane. And if I do, even if I maybe amass some form of wealth and I'm able to buy a plane, I say I name it whatever airlines, nobody's going to fly with me. It's because I cannot show the credentials and I have not gone through the process that brings me into that category of being called a pilot. So also the captain of a ship. You can't just wake up in the morning and say you want to navigate a ship from Africa to Europe. There's a process. You go through the schools, the maritime school. You go through the flying school. But what do we have in terms of our political sphere? There is a school of politics. We have parties in this country. How many of those political parties have an institute? The APC, what does the APC have in terms of its grooming process? What is it doing with its youth forum? What is the PDP doing with its youth forum? What is the other parties, ABGA, what are their youth forums being used for? Is it for mobilization? Is it to get people to go and vote on the elections day? How do we select those who eventually will be the next crop of leaders that will take the positions of the House of Reps? And it comes from the mentality of sticking in power and not understanding that there is a generation that is following through that will come after you. For instance, there's this whole concept, and if you look back in history, that where a king is about to, more or less, he feels that his time has come, he starts to groom his next of kin. He starts to invite him to the next meetings. He starts to, where the council of chiefs are sitting down, he brings him along. He makes sure that these are the processes, this is what we do, this is how we arrive at the decisions we make. But is that happening currently? I'll take one example, and with no prejudice to the APC. The APC just set up a 61-man team, contact and strategy. And the whole list is filled up with honorable senator, former governor. No young person. No person that is being groomed to say that this person is the future. And I can bet that the youngest on that list will be 45 at the very least. That is not the process we need to see in grooming. What we have is a situation where leaders prepare the meal, and the followers come and have and sit on the dining and eat. We need to see the followers also being those who have shown capacity, identified and brought to the kitchen. We need to see them learn the ropes, because what we're having is a situation where one crop of leaders move from one era to another era, and then you have a deficit. That is what we currently have. How many of our leaders today have 1, 2, 3, 4 people who they are grooming? And you see, this concept is not just in the political arena alone. It's in all the sectors. When we look at leaders, and I disagree that only politics should or politics should have that role to say. No, every sector of the country has a part to play. How are we grooming the leaders in health? How are we grooming the leaders in engineering? Are we going to always rely on Julius Berger? How are we grooming the leaders in the ICT sector? How many people are we saying that we are looking up to this person in the ICT sectors? And those who are currently at the top of their fields today, how are they grooming? How are they recruiting the next leaders who will take over from them? We have the best health practitioners. They are leaving the country. What are we doing at the topmost of our health echelon? What are they doing to make sure that they make the space better for the younger ones who are coming? How are we grooming the next cardiologists, the next best cardiologists in the country? How are we grooming the next bridge builders? We need to be deliberate in every sector on the recruitment process. We need to have those who are already at the top take up that mandate to have an apprenticeship system that they would identify those that they see potentials in and groom them to be able to take up from them. That's why we have a leadership deficit, actually.
All right. Toby, thanks a lot for your comments. Jumaine,
Yes.
that's a pointed one. I just wanted, Prof, before we proceed again, Prof, I would like you to respond to some of the key issues on the table. Again, narrowing it down to the leadership challenges that we have around the political sector because of the primacy of politics. Toby mentioned something. We are over 20 years now in the Fourth Republic, and you can blame the interregnum and the past for the disruption and the growth and evolution of political parties. Parties still remain very fluid. I think PDP had an institute. I don't know whether it's still functioning. I don't know whether APC has an institute. Where do party followers go to seek knowledge, to seek enhancement? Where do even those who are party operatives and those who are already seated in parliament or as governors, where do they go to for research outcomes? So that you say, listen, we think that we are deviating or we are on the right track. Continue on this trajectory and we shall hit it. These are some of the things that people have been talking about in terms of the leadership deficit and therefore the very poor governance outcomes that we have all around us.
Well, thank you, Kingsley. Let me start by saying that a lot of what has been said so far is not new in Nigeria. People have been saying these things for years. People have been preaching about them. You listen to bishops, priests, they preach about these things, good leadership. You go to the mosque, the Honorable also mentioned, cited from the Islamic faith. People have been preaching and appealing. This kind of enlightenment programs have, so many of them, countless number of them have taken place. You talked about the Institute. Yes, the Institute is there. There are so many other platforms. I know that the National Assembly has routinely had retreats. I hope that is still on. Maybe the COVID-19 thing may have disrupted it. But in the past, there used to be retreats to ensure that members of the National Assembly are up to speed on some of these things. You cited a very good example of the captain of the ship, the pilot, and all this. Why are they getting it right? The reason is that they stick to the rules. They obey the rules. The problem in Nigeria is that most often people do not obey the rules. Honorable Shaba talked earlier about the Electoral Act. It's necessary to set laws, regulations, rules, and hold people accountable to those rules. The political parties have their constitutions. Are those rules, those constitutions adhered to? Honorable Shaba talked about litigations. A lot of those litigations happen because the rules have not been complied with. So you give opportunity to people to go to who feel that they have not been fairly treated because the rules to ensure fairness have not been complied with by the leadership of the party. The pilot can be trusted to take you from one destination to the other because the rules are followed. You have, is it ICAO or these international civil aviation rules? And if you must operate planes as a country, you must comply with those international standards. Otherwise, they will not certify you. They will not allow you. They will sanction you. The same thing with the captain of a ship. Unfortunately, at the political level, we don't have that kind of sanction, externally imposed sanction to keep people in check. Every Nigerian pilot must comply with those international regulations. But do Nigerian leadership comply with international standards? So we should begin to formulate rules and hold the leadership and the people generally accountable. Hold them accountable and ensure that they comply with the rules. And to ensure that where there's a violation of the rules, there are sanctions. For me, that is the way that Nigeria must go. If we do not go that way of ensuring that we comply with this, we'll just be repeating ourselves and debating these issues ad infinitum. Because the rules are there to guide the process, to ensure that you reach good outcomes. Even in the area of governance, you talked about governance challenges. There are rules about governance. The Constitution, which is the big law, they call it the ground norm, under which other laws come, is there. It's written in fairly simple English that people can understand. But do people comply? Do they follow? So for me, that is the major challenge, that once we begin to hold people accountable and enforce the rules in a fair manner, then we begin to see the changes that we are talking about. Anybody who finds himself in a leadership position must know that he's on the hot seat and people would assess his performance based on the extent to which he has complied with the rules. And if he has fallen short, then the sanctions will be meted out to him. Anything less than that, we unfortunately continue to group and manage. But I do hope that enlightenment programs, educative programs like this will also serve to direct the minds of people to the right thing to do. So in summary, it is not enough just to be talking and preaching and sermonizing. Because when it comes, you may talk to people, political leadership, but when he's alone in his office with his pen taking a decision, he's not going to be listening to what the sermon he had. He will be looking at what are the implications, what are the sanctions. If I violate this, what punishment, what am I likely to suffer? Is there going to be sanction? That is what he will be considering, because there's temptation right in front of him. The only thing that will keep him in check is fear of sanction, not that somebody was preaching a sermon somewhere. So we must hold people accountable to the rules and the laws.
Honorable Shaba said in his opening comment that the process of emergence is also key.
Yes, I just talked about party primaries, for instance. Yeah. How do the candidates emerge? Is there, every party has a constitution.
Before is it followed?
That is the question.
Yes.
They are not always followed. Is there, people
but
try.
That is a peculiar disease of the Fourth Republic, yes. Prof. A peculiar disease of the Fourth Republic. Let's say it's the Second Republic wasn't like this.
Yeah, there was more party discipline and more. Yeah, you are right. But again, how do we? Because unless things tend to degenerate, things tend to degenerate unless you avert or stop, anticipate, and stop the process. Unless you stop the process, it will get worse. Look, we are talking about banditry now. Banditry, the issue of banditry first came up when I was in Senate, between about 2004, people are thinking it's a new thing. It's not a new thing.
That's been done.
I remember that the Senate, we debated it and sent a committee of a delegation, committee, ad hoc committee of the Senate to about Yobe, that axis, northeast axis at that time. But it continued to degenerate to the extent that now even schools have been shut in many parts of the country. And because that was not nipped in the bud at the time.
Well,
things are getting worse.
Prof, I'm sorry, Juma, again, Honorable Shaba and Toby. You see, Prof is itemizing for us the symptoms of the leadership deficit and the governance challenges that we are facing. In real terms, we have had a conversation on Good Morning Nigeria on the so-called ungoverned spaces.
Yes.
There's no space in Nigeria that is not under some authority. So where was that authority? At some point in time, T1 up to time T2 and up to a time where we are now having these multifarious problems. There are local government chairmen. You've been a local government chairman. How many of them are up to speed with what is happening in their localities? There are councillors who have no idea, as to why they are in the place. There are other persons in positions of authority and therefore leadership, and it is this lack of either the skill or the competence or even the grooming to recognize the governance imperative that we are discussing this subject. Honorable Shaba.
Well, first, let me take my bearing from the point of still back on the leadership and the kind of people we have in saddle, with all due respect. In most cases, when leaders, let's even leave the process of the emergence. Once they get to the office, most people are concerned with populist decisions. They want to be praised. They want to be. Leadership is not it's not a popularity contest per se. There are times leaders must have to take quote and unquote painful decisions, difficult decisions, that irrespective of what the bandwagon feels, this is where I want to be. Side by side, that is the institutions. We must build strong institutions that will defy the whims and caprices of leaders who want to muzzle up the system to gain for personal gains. I looked at the American election, the one we just had, they just had recently. If the system was weak, we'll probably not have a peaceful transition. The system was strong enough to withstand the whims of a leader who thought that he could do anything, with all due respect, to perpetuate himself perhaps in power. For a man who went to court and lost some 60-something court cases to insist that he was duly elected, it blows my mind. But the system was able to. If it had happened in Nigeria, believe me honestly, he will remain. Yeah. And nothing will happen. Nothing. A lot of people will go on the streets and get killed for nothing. So away from even the leadership itself is this idea of trying to build institutions. Strip the leader, strip one man of the power to determine the fate of everybody. It has to be a collegiate thing. There must be checks. If you have a situation where a man is imbued with enormous powers and he's accountable to nobody, no institution, then we're all imperiled. I don't want to go too much into debate, but I'm sure you all appreciate what I'm saying. We need institutions to be stronger than those who are running them and not the other way around. So, it's a vicious circle. One, I don't even know which one came first, whether it's the leadership that will now build the institutions or the institution will groom the kind of leadership you have. Unfortunately for us in the political space, it's an all-comers game. There are no rules of engagement. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry can wake up today and say, look, so long as you have your school, in some cases even disputed school certificate results, you can come and say you want to
run on the platform. And that's, I think the highest office in the land does not even require more than a school cert. So long as this door is left open for everybody to come in, then you're going to have a problem. We must have a system of regulating those who take the shot at leaders, because in leadership position, you are determining the fate of others. Today, the average Nigerian is imperiled. I come from a constituency that I dare not wake up and say I want to go without a retinue of security aids, and it's unacceptable to me. It has never been like that. I've never been what do you call it, an organization person, so to speak. I just like to do my things as simple as I. But today, I dare not. I live in a place, my constituency is arguably the closest to the Federal Capital Territory. I want to go on a distance of less than 200 kilometers. The kind of things that the infrastructural deficits that abound on that route makes it even easy for those who all these criminals to be able to carry out their nefarious activities unchecked. Because whether you like it or not, if you're on the highway, if you have to slow down at a particular spot, you must even slow down because the road is bad. For more than 15 years, a distance of less than 200 kilometers is still lying there. So all these things must be looked into. My idea of a leader is he that can look into the eyes of anybody and tell him the truth. My idea of a good followership are those who can rise and tell even tyrannical leaders the truth without fearing whose else is God. Collectively, we can do it. But individually, you are imperiled. So once you start, I just imagine Nigeria. Look at Myanmar. It's a third world country. There has been a coup there. And since that coup happened, the people have not rested. In Nigeria, Mama will call, Shola, Shewani, go back home. Blah, 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 blah. Say you're the only child I have. That is the kind of things we experience. And what are you going to get? And say, okay, that is what we're left with. We have to accept it. No. A people can also shape their own destinies if they are determined. Nobody can make you inferior without your consent. If you agree that, look, these things can perpetuate and without check, so be it. But if you agree that, look, together we can make things work. The political space have experienced some form of turmoil in the past, and we got over them with the hope that things will be bettered. But your guess is as good as mine whether the answer is yes, if things are bettered. I will leave that for another day. But on the whole, sir, we don't want leaders that will pander to bandwagon. We need leaders with strength of character, leaders who can say, look, I'm working according to the dictates of the Constitution and conscience. Once you have those leaders who can stand on their own, irrespective of what majority, because in most cases, the followers don't even know what to applaud. I've seen instances, the followers will applaud even the wrong thing, yes, because they are likely misinformed. So away from those kind of leaders who you want accolades, you want to be praised to the high heavens. No, let your results resonate in accolade for you, and not you don't force it on people. So I think we're in a big mess, but I think that this is the time to look inward. I mean, retrospectively, and try to work on. Thank God the Electoral Act is still in the process of further amendment. I hope that Mr. President will do the needful by appending his signature to those amendments so that we can have a process that will prop up leaders transparently, minimize litigation. Don't be surprised that even those who believe they have been cheated out of the system could even start to even sabotage the system. It's not impossible. So when we have minimal infractions, then we can start to build the foundation for a greater tomorrow. That is my take.
Honorable Shaba, thank you so much. Johannes, Honorable Shaba has painted a very beautiful picture.
Absolutely.
Is there any possibility that we can and will take away godfatherism? Because this can only be possible if an individual as a leader is independent of any kind of interference from anybody. Can we take away godfatherism from leadership position in Nigeria? Can that be possible? Because, you know, you said a lot of people who are doctors, who are nurses, who are engineers and all that should groom young people who are coming up. Most of these people leave this profession and join politics.
Very true.
How can that happen? How can we have a system that works?
When you say to how can we have a system without godfatherism, I have a perhaps an alternate view on godfatherism. I don't think that perhaps maybe our system of godfatherism is one where you have a puppet and his puppeteer, and you have a funnel that is channeling funds out of the system for his godfather. But I think we should see godfatherism from a light of grooming, of apprenticeship, where you have a person who has attained a position in government or in whatever sector and has become reached the zenith and is able to get a flock of people who look up to him, identify the best among them, and help them attain the zenith of their own leadership aspirations. I think that is how it should be looked at. And importantly, I want to piggyback on what Honorable said on institutions. I'll use Nigeria as an example. We have the institutions, we have a lot of institutions, and in terms of for the checks and balances, we have the National Assembly, which Honorable is a member of. The judiciary is there. We have other security agencies and what have you. We have laws that guide even the processes. But the question always falls back to one thing. Are these laws being enforced? And that is what Prof had mentioned. How are we enforcing these rules? Are we following through with the enforcement of them? It boils back to the people. Institutions are not made up of artificial intelligence. Institutions are not computers that are making decisions based on algorithms. Institutions are made up of the people, the Nigerian people. Our parties have rules and regulations that govern them. Those rules and regulations, and when you look at the constitutions of the parties, and even like Prof said, even the 1999 constitution, they're all clear-cut language. This will be done this way, this will be done this way. But the people who enforce them have always been the problem. So it boils back to the fact that the people are the problem. And when you look at the people, what are the issues? The values. What are the values that we have as a people? What are the values that we have as a country? So when a person in a position to make certain decisions sits with his pen and the paper that would basically change destinies is faced with such a decision, what informs his decision? Is it his profit? Is it serving his people? Is it about how much he's going to make? Is it the interest of a few? Is it for the good of many? All of these decisions will be made based on the integrity in this person's mind.
I'm just wondering, Johannes Toby,
yes.
I still want to stay with you. Are there lessons that the political sector could learn, for instance, from the business sector? We're talking about leadership. Using the examples of blue chip companies that are quoted, when a CEO is appointed, sometimes you can see the impact of that appointment as the market responds, either positively.
Indeed.
The market value of the shares either go up or go down. If a CFO, that is the Chief Financial Officer, is appointed, you can see how the market also responds. because they still look this as a potential change agent. Even in politics, where certain leaders emerge in certain circumstances in certain countries, you can also see how political economists are analyzing the country risk arising from the emergence of this particular individual, and how sometimes investments will just flow away from that environment because you can't, the view will be you cannot entrust your investments to these persons. Do we seem to have that understanding in Nigeria, or as Honorable Shaba has indicated, politics is an all-commerce game? You know, I don't attend political meetings, but some of the things I hear, I mean, well, of course, people just...
You know, it's not like the other
Say it as it comes to mind.
Toby, you know what I'm talking about.
I do. So let me answer with one word, then I'll build on it. Meritocracy. Nobody becomes the CEO of Apple if he does not merit it. Nobody becomes the CEO of Twitter, of Facebook, of Google, if he's not the best person to handle the job. Even if it's your best friend or your son or whoever that comes in, you can't put that person as the CEO of Apple. Then it comes back to also governance, the governance structure, the internal governance structure. None of these companies that do not have boards of directors, boards of governance, who are there to check the activities of the CEO. The CEO cannot just wake up one morning and make decisions. He must follow through with his board. And when you look at it, we have similar structures in our country. We have similar structures in how we do governance here in Nigeria. The president, for instance, has his Federal Executive Council. Memos are brought forward. Arguments are put forward. Whether this memo will pass or that memo will not pass. So also, the Constitution has put it that no monies can be spent without the blessing of the National Assembly. That must be followed through. You cannot make expenditures. You have to have heads of MDAs go through the process of defending their budgets. These are checks and balances. These are saying that nothing would happen without some form of authority. We do have these checks and balances, and that is why I believe that in terms of the laws, in terms of the institutions, we have good enough. Laws and institutions. But the question always is, who are the people that make up these institutions? How do they merit the positions they get? How are they groomed to the leadership or the positions they get? What is the qualification really for becoming a member of the National Assembly or becoming a member of the House of Representatives or the Senate? So what substance do you bring in lawmaking? What substance do you bring in? What are the qualifications to become a minister? What substance do you bring to the Federal Executive Council? These questions are the definers of eventually how our laws or how our governance happens. But then it still falls back to meritocracy. Do the people in power merit the offices that they hold? In most cases, they do not.
Okay, Toby, thanks. Juma, I would like us to get Professor Osumbo's perspective on this, because he talked about meritocracy and references had been made earlier to accountability. Yesterday, Professor Sam Egu said something as part of the comments by other guests, that visioning being one of the requirements of leadership is already encapsulated in Chapter 2 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, being the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. So, for any person who is interested in political governance, take that document and then apply it to your domain. Whether you are a local government councillor, you are a local government chairman or House of Assembly member, and so on and so forth. And then the checks and balances to which Toby has made reference are also scattered in different sections of the Constitution. To say, yes, even though we have the emperor syndrome these days in the States, there are otherwise, you are supposed to have checks and balances. But it would appear that with the rising impunity, that aspects of our constitution are just being ignored, being neglected. And people just drift, and the consequences, of course, are the things that we are seeing with us today. How, therefore, can we begin to draw attention again to these essential requirements of leadership? For you to be a leader, you must be informed yourself. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? How do you want to get there? How do you respond to your followers, to the yearnings of your followers? Prof.
Well, Honorable Toby used a number of words which are very relevant, very germane. One, he talked about our value system.
Yes.
You may have the same kind of constitution as the United States of America, but if your value system is different, then the result will be different, which is why the issue of value system of the society is very relevant here. An example was also cited, given of Myanmar, where they are battling with the military. The value system of the people, the behavior, the attitude of the people has thrown up a peculiar situation there, which may not necessarily be replicated were it to be Nigeria. That is the point that was made before. Then, Honorable Toby also mentioned the issue of meritocracy. He hammered on that severally, which is important as opposed to mediocrity. I also made the point that, as they say, bad money drives away good money. The negative always appears to carry more force than the positive. I hope this is correct in physics or chemistry. But what I mean is mediocrity has a way of multiplying itself in geometric proportions, whereas meritocracy may operate maybe in arithmetic proportion. It is easier for mediocrity to multiply and replicate itself. And when you have a system which is not based on meritocracy, then you begin to have the symptoms that we are seeing. Jumai talked about, asked him the question of the leadership being influenced by godfathers, godfatherism. And the answer is that you cannot really rule out godfathers. They exist, even in the church. There are people are happy to say, this is my godfather. There's nothing inherently bad in godfatherism or to say, I have a godfather. But it is what the godfather does, what the two of them do with that relationship that really should cause concern. And if the godfather now decides to appropriate the whole system to himself, then the evils begin to manifest. I would say again, we've talked about strong institutions. And I made the point before that those institutions will be strong if the rules guarding them are strong. Using the example, the world is a global village now, so we should feel free to learn from the successes of other countries. In the US, while the outcome went the way it did and the people were able to resist the attempt to disrupt the process, is that I watched a video of a military, an army officer, coming out to say their loyalty is not to any individual, it is to the Constitution.
Correct. That's true. Correct.
We want to see people saying that my loyalty is not to you, it is to the Constitution. And as you said, I have a copy of the Constitution. I'm familiar with what the Constitution expects of me, and I will do what the Constitution enjoins me to do. We saw the role that the courts played in the US. The court said some of these elections being disputed are governed by the laws of the state.
Exactly.
You may not like it, but if the state says they've certified it, there's nothing we can do. Again, because the laws of the state are respected. The courts respect the laws, the federal system of the United States of America. So I've just taken two examples. The military are loyal to the Constitution. The courts are loyal to the Constitution. That is what we should be doing. And I have mentioned before, several times before, that we need more people to have, you talked about councillors and chairmen and honorable members having, do they really read? Do people read? You know, it's said that there's a very poor reading culture amongst Nigerians. Do they read the Constitution? I remember I mentioned the last time I appeared on this program, I also said whether these big elected political office holders, do they bother to read the Constitution? So we must get to the stage of emphasizing that it's not just enough. And I made the recommendation, each time a new National Assembly comes, they must give them copies of the Constitution, all these things, including some landmark cases of the courts, because some of the crises, contentions that I see happening in the National Assembly have been educated upon before by the Supreme Court. So if the new members, because institutional memory is short because of the high turnover rate at the National Assembly, if they were to see the decisions of the Supreme Court 10, 15 years ago, they would be properly guided. Then my final word on this now is the federal system in Nigeria should operate better. We are supposed to be a federation, but the federal system is not operating as it should. Using, for instance, the example of the United States of America. For instance, we should have, the main concern of Nigerians now is insecurity. And that is because the governors who are supposed to be the chief security officers of the state always come out to say they are just chief security officer by name. They don't have any command or control powers over the security forces in their states. I know that there have been, I think the federal government, Mr. President also, has directed that states must protect their forests. I hope he was quoted, I have read that, and I hope that is true. And if that is the case, the states should be able to exercise, have forces of coercion to be able to monitor their forests and to flush out these bandits from the forests. The National Assembly is going through the process of amending the Constitution, and I do hope, two of you are here, that you will do what is needs as much as possible to ensure devolution of some powers from the federal to the state, because many people have agreed that the exclusive legislative list is too heavily loaded. There are items that you can easily move to the concurrent list, if not remove, render it a residual matter completely. But there are areas that you can strengthen the states in order that they are able to play their role in minimizing the challenges of good governance in Nigeria.
Okay, Senator Osareme Osumbo, former governor of Edo State and former chairman, Nigerian Law Reform Commission, thank you so much for coming. We're running out of time. We have another topic to discuss on the program this morning.
Thank you
so much.
My pleasure.
Honorable Shabo Ibrahim, member representing Lokoja Kwatankarfe Federal Constituency and former Algon chairman, Kogi State. Thank you so much for coming.
It's my pleasure.
And Johannes Toby Wajiola, curator, Abuja Global Shapers Community. Your input has been very, very pleasurable to listen to, and we hope younger men will come up, to look for elective positions so that they will say they are not being left behind. Thank you so much for coming.
It's a pleasure.
On the program. And we'll take a break now. When we return, our second conversation on the program begins.